Hello, Daniel. How are you doing?
Hi, Sunny. All good, thanks. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for agreeing to do this. This is the first interview for the website, so really appreciate it.
That's an honor. Glad to be the first.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's begin with what were the beginnings of Surpreeze? When and how did it begin? Was it a miniature shop first or the visual effects studio?
Yeah, so to begin with, it was just me and my business partner, Silas Pulse, being two freelancers. He was doing production design and physical constructions and so on for film and TV. I was more into visual effects and the digital side of things. And we worked together on various projects. We shared an office to begin with, and then we started a company together, mainly working with commercials for a few years, and then we started Surpreeze in 2016. And our focus was having like a foot in both worlds, both in miniatures, the physical side of things, and digital. So we always had all the tools at our disposal when we were bidding on a project. So yeah, that's how it started.
How do you shoot miniatures to make it look life-size in the end? What is the scale you need for the miniatures and the amount of detailing you need?
So we build miniatures as large as possible. Obviously, you're trying to mimic life-size objects, so you want to build them as big as possible, and especially when things are blowing up or being flushed with water and so on. And there are several reasons, but the main issue is obviously the physical tumbling and just physics. You want it to be as close to the real thing as possible, but also if you have water or if you have fire, those elements obviously won't scale as well as physical objects that you can paint and kind of fake. You can fake the scale on physical objects, but you can't fake the scale of fire or water. So you can use those elements at certain scales, but it needs to be large enough to kind of hold up in camera, so you don't.
Yeah.
So you're not put off and okay, that's way smaller than it's supposed to be, or so. Those are the considerations. If it's only a static thing, let's say a town or a forest or static objects that's not moving, or static objects that are not supposed to blow up or burn or being flushed with water, then you can work in way smaller scales, and it's basically just up to the miniature builders to make it detailed enough so that when you film it, it's going to translate as a full-size scene. So, the last consideration is also how close you're going. If you need to go very close to an object, then obviously you want the object to be bigger so that all the details hold up in camera. If it's just for a wide shot, like a whole city or a whole bridge or a whole something, then you can, the scale can be smaller. So there are various considerations, but I think the same goes with 3D as well. When we build 3D, obviously, if we go closer to the 3D, we need to add more detail and make sure that you have plenty of displacement maps and loads of geometry and so on to make it hold up close to camera.
So water and fire are difficult to shoot, right? Because physics. So would you avoid shooting them, or would you shoot the miniatures and then add fire or water then later?
It's really up to every task. So every time we get a sequence or a shot, there is we start from scratch and we make all those considerations. I think when you leave things up to physics, you basically have to. Obviously, you can control it and you can do certain things to to make the fire or the water behave the way you want it to. But at the end of the day, you're left with physics, because physics is going to behave in a certain way, and some scenes or shots may require the fire or the water to behave in a certain way, artistic way, and move in a way that it wouldn't do in real life. And so in those cases we might go for a CG version just to make that process easier. But no, in many cases, if you wanted to make it look realistic, why not do it for real, you know?
Yeah.
But it's always like every time we do it, it's a case by case consideration. It's never like we don't jump to a tool because we think the tool is cool. We take into consideration all factors and then we go from there. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you get involved in Baahubali 2, The Conclusion? Was that your first Indian project?
So visual effects supervisor RC Kamalakanan, he reached out to us with a film called Puli. It's South Indian film from Chennai, I think. And that was just
one question. How did he find you?
Yeah, so he reached out to us via our website, I think. Okay. We had some material out there and some breakdowns of some miniature stuff, and then he approached us with this costume. There's Lilliput village in the film, like small people. It's a adventure film, and you have these small Lilliput people, and one of the actors or one of the characters needed to have like this feather dress. I think probably this size. So basically, a feather would cover most of the body of these small Lilliput people, and most of the costumes were made out of different materials to look like small dresses and small clothing. But in the case with this feather thing, all the feathers would be way too small compared to what size it needed to be. So he asked us if you could do that dress in miniature. So we built just a small dress on a green screen mannequin, and then we shot it on green screen, and then those plates were then added onto all the plates with the actress. Just a fairly small job, but that's what introduced us to the South Indian film industry. And I think a few months later he came back to us with Baahubali 2, and basically the whole dam break sequence that we got to work on, and that was a big job for us. And yeah, and from there we've been working on several Indian films.
Talk to me more about what you did on Baahubali 2.
Yeah, so we worked on the sequence from the moment where the dam breaks. Basically the whole flushing of the soldiers down the hillside, and that was all done in miniature, more or less, at least. There were some composites and some inserts of made in different ways, but the big shots, they are all miniature. And so we constructed 3 pieces of that hillside. All 3 were about 25 meters long and up to 10 meters tall. So we had to stack shipping containers on top of each other to build the miniature tall enough. And then we had this. We made this dump tank, a water dump tank, out of 20-foot shipping container. So we could basically open that up all at once with a mechanism and flush the whole miniature in one go. So yeah, it was it was kind of it's always you're always sweating when you're doing these kind of things, but because it's more or less a one taker. Obviously you can reset and redress and do it again in some cases, but in most cases it's really a one taker. So we had many cameras, 6 red cameras shooting at the same time when we were doing the miniature shoot. So that was, and then we went to India, Hyderabad after the miniature shoot, because the miniature was built and shot in Denmark, and then we went to Hyderabad to shoot plates with soldiers being kind of flushed away. We did that with the production down there, so that was also very interesting.
Let's come to RRR. So, what was the brief given to you by the director or the supervisor? Did they come to you with this particular sequence in mind? How did that talk go?
Yeah, so Srinivas Mohan, the overall visual effects supervisor for RRR, he came to us in 2018, December I think 2018, and at that point he wanted us to build some miniature train cars and do this these fire and explosion effects in miniature, and so we started building those, and then we spoke along the way, and then he asked us if we could do the CG portion as well, and we love to complete the shots that we start. So if we do miniatures, we love to do the compositing and the 3D and CG work as well. So we were lucky enough to do the whole sequence. So we built the train, all train cars, eight of them, and then we sent them off to Hyderabad, India, and then we went there a few months later and shot the miniature there, and then from there we made all the CG work and compositing and bringing it all together after that. Yeah.
Awesome. How did you visualize this? Did you do the Previs, someone else?
Yeah, when we were approached with the sequence, we got the already made Previs, and that was done by Makuta VFX. Okay. Yeah. So and it's actually pretty close to the final result. Obviously there are going to be some creative changes, and some shots are taken out, some shots are put in, but it's actually pretty close to the initial Previs that was made by Makuta. So
talk to me about doing multiple passes on miniatures, right? Would that apply here?
So in the case of RRR, we couldn't do any multipass shooting. The only time you can do multipass is when you have static miniatures. So it's great for, we did a Christmas commercial once where we had buildings with lights inside the houses and street lights and all, different kinds of lights. And obviously if you're mimicking like a moonlight or a sunlight or something, and you also need lights in windows, the exposure on those two different types of lamps are very different. So a big lamp that would then be, let's say, a moonlight, is going to be much stronger and much more powerful than small LEDs. So those two exposures, they're going to have a hard time beating, like the LEDs are just going to drown in the light from the big moonlight, right? So in order to make that mix a little bit easier, we can do multiple, basically shoot the shot several times. So one time for just the small LEDs, one time for just the moonlight, and then we can fill the room with the haze and do a haze pass, so we get the atmosphere in the room, and then we can do we can do several passes for all sorts of different lights, and then we can combine it like we would with a 3D render, basically. And that's awesome for static models, but as soon as you're doing explosions or objects that's moving and tumbling around and all sorts of physical action, you can't repeat the exact same movement, because that's kind of basis of doing multipass is that everything is exactly as it was in the last pass, so you can basically put the layers on top of each other, and it's going to align exactly where the previous pass was. But when you have a train car that's tumbling around, you can't make that tumble the exact same way. It needs to be pixel perfect, and that's never going to happen. So that needs to be a one taker basically. And then if you want to do it again, you have to reset and rebuild some of the miniature, and then you can do it again.
I'm a big proponent of mixing practical and CG whenever possible. Would you explain why someone would use practical miniatures and shots instead of CG?
It's basically a tool, you know. It's you choose the right tool for the job, and that's been our philosophy from the beginning. And I think there was a trend when CG kind of started to take over, and then there was a long period of okay, CG can fix anything and everything, and all the other tools were just kind of thrown out. But we've along that trend, I would say, we've always kept our foot in the practical, because we believe that it's still viable for many things, and sometimes it can be more cost effective, sometimes it can be like just give you that additional realism, because you have real lights and real fire and water and smoke elements, so you get more physicality with the practical elements. And if anything, then at least you have a really good reference of what it's supposed to look like. Because when you build something from scratch in 3D or CG, it's basically a synthetic image that you're trying to mimic the real world instead of just going out and shoot the real world. So I guess miniatures is just a compromise. If you can't do the real thing, like full on big life-size elements, you scale it down to where it's practical, and then you get the same thing, just smaller basically, and it's easier to handle.
Always good to have reference.
Always good to have reference, and always good to keep it grounded in a real physical world, especially if you're trying to mimic the real thing, right? So
was there any asset sharing done between vendors?
Yes, it was. In our case, we got some crowd assets for the crowds, basically people that we could scatter around the scene. And we also shared some assets. Among other things, we shared the train car, the train oil car, and I think that was used for the underneath the water scene. Basically, after our sequence, they jump into the water and then they walk towards each other underneath the water after the whole bridge scene. And
after
that train, and then you see the train asset in the background.
I think Firefly did that.
Okay, that's right.
How many tests do you do to prove if your method will work when you're pitching your idea to the director or the team?
None really. Well, none that would, none that could reverse the approach, because in this case, when we went to India to shoot the miniatures, we hadn't done any tests before that. We went there with the miniatures sent, and team was ready to shoot and everything was gone. We did a couple of days before we did the actual miniature shoot, we did some tests to kind of see how big the flames were supposed to be. Basically how much gunpowder to use, let's say. But at that point, we were past the point of no return. So and I guess that's a big statement of trust. So we were very happy when it came out nicely.
What's your relationship like with the cinematographer, Senthil Kumar?
Yeah, so he was actually the first person we met in person, because he came to, when we did the Baahubali sequence, he came to us in Denmark
Okay.
when we did the
Yeah.
that sequence. And so yeah, it was really very nice to work with him again when we did RRR, and so it goes for the rest of the crew, the director, the visual effects supervisor. It's a great team. They're super visionary and creative, and yeah, I mean, you can see it on the final film. It's gorgeous.
Absolutely.
It looks really beautiful. So
I see you using a practical miniature bridge to extend the the live action plates that were shot. How are you doing that? Are you doing during principal photography? What's happening there?
okay, so the good thing, or the good way this was shot, is that the main plates, or the majority of the principal photography with the life-size sets. There weren't many life-size sets, but there was a road and there were a couple of pillars and a few things. And those shots were made before we shot the miniature. So we had a good reference in terms of where the camera needed to be. And so you basically just calculate, okay, if the camera was here on the life-size shoot, then the camera needs to be here on the miniature. So the miniature bridge itself was made by the production team in Hyderabad, led by Sabu Cyril, and so because it was a very exact copy, like the pillars and so on, where that was an exact copy of the full size. Then we get to position the camera exactly where it needs to be, and then you get a perfect alignment. There are some pixel nudging to get it like all perfect in comp, but we got a really good reference for where it needed to be. And yeah, you're basically positioning the camera twice, once for the principal photography and once for the miniature, and then you have two plates you can put together.
Did you build the miniature again in Denmark, or the?
No, this time we actually went to when we built the train cars. We went to Virginia. We started working on them in Denmark, and then we figured, okay, we might as well, because we needed some specific parts from the US, and then we found this workshop that they basically build fully working trains, model trains for amusement parks and so on. So they're not building trains that needs to look photoreal in a movie making sense, but they make the necessary parts that we needed. And so instead of shipping all those heavy parts to Denmark and then ship everything to India, we went there and constructed all the necessary parts there, and basically did the whole finishing and everything in Virginia, US, and then we only had one shipping cost. So because I mean, they're fairly large. When the train cars are done and all packed up, it fills up a 20-foot container. More or less.
Wow.
So
okay.
yeah.
I didn't know they were that big. Yeah.
They're pretty large, especially when you have 8 of them. So it's not easy to move around from a country to another.
When you're shooting this miniature bridge to match or to extend the live action plates, right? Are you using motion control for the moving shots?
The moving shots. Then if the camera is moving, we'll be using CG.
Okay.
So we built the whole bridge in 3D, and as soon as the camera is moving in the shot, we'll use that bridge. If the camera is more static, we can use the miniature bridge instead.
Yeah.
But either way, we needed to extend. So because the miniature bridge was only it was only a portion of the bridge. It wasn't the whole bridge, and so either way we had to extend the miniature bridge also with CG. So
we see 1920s Delhi in the movie, right? And you worked on it. Tell me about your approach and the references you got to do that.
yeah, so we after we did the miniature shoot, we went to Rajamundry with the visual effects supervisor and his team to shoot basically what would be references for that whole area that we built, the bridge, the village on each side, and basically the whole environment that our scene is happening in. And obviously Rajamundry today is a more modern city than 1920, so we couldn't use every single building as a one-to-one reference, but we could use the city layout, the way that the bridge is curving, many different elements that we can find inspiration from, where trees are positioned, and just the so many very nice references and also textures that we could find. So it was a great basis to have for our CG. It's basically full CG everything, so it was good to have a root in reality when we're building that.
Back to the miniature bridge. You said the production designer built the miniature bridge, right?
Yes.
And then you built it again in Denmark?
No.
Okay.
So yeah, well, we did. We didn't build it in miniature though. We built it in CG. So we scanned Sabu's miniature bridge with textures and really covered his shot it from every angle, basically, his miniature, and then we reconstructed that model in CG, and then we extended the CG to basically curve down to each side of the village on each side, because the miniature was maybe just the middle portion with a few columns or a few pillars, and then we extended that in CG to cover the whole area, basically. So, and that was an exact copy, so that was great as well to have that reference, because you have it's a metal construction, and then there's a lot of debris or a lot of weathering done to the metal, and lots of great reference that we could find on that miniature. That was a great build, really beautiful.
Did you have any shots that were especially difficult or had many iterations to get approved?
Yeah, I think probably the shot that we did the most rounds with was the long pullback shot, where Ram is basically comes running out of the alleyway towards the camera, and the camera pulls back. So there was a wire cam that pulled back from basically what was a fairly large set piece with some extras, but obviously we pulled way further back than that, and that's all CG. And there was a lot of creative iterations to that scene, in terms of is it supposed to be more like a village area, more like a city? So we did a lot of iterations to kind of find that balance. And since the scene is so big, there's so many, like the crowds we had thousands and thousands of people as crowds, and that was a huge scene, which made it very heavy to work with. In the end, the Maya is basically having a hard time opening the scene and navigating in the scene because it's so heavy, and that was probably one of the shots that we started with at the very beginning, and probably one of the last shots to go out the door. So that would be the shot,
Yeah.
and that's probably my favorite shot as well. So very pleased. With it.
I'd say it paid off because it looks stunning in the movie.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, tell me this, with so many people working on a movie like RRR, right? How does the director maintain his vision? Every time it probably goes to multiple people before it reaches you, feedback or anything, right?
Yeah,
How does that go?
good question. I think in the case of SS Rajamouli, he's very hands-on, and that's probably one of the reasons why he gets his vision across. He is on set. He will be down there with the team. He's not just sitting behind the monitor giving orders to those around him. He will be down there speaking to everyone, make sure that everything works according to his vision, and the same thing in the post work. He will be very hands-on, giving feedback directly, and so that's awesome for us because we get the direct feedback, and that's probably one of the reasons why it's very much his vision, the overall story, and that all the beats happens the way he wants to. So
That's awesome that he's that hands-on.
yeah, it's super awesome. I think he's probably the most hands-on director I've ever met. Like he will be down there sometimes sometimes operating whatever practical thing that needs to be done. It's very hands-on. That's very cool.
What's your relationship like with the visual effects supervisor, Srinivas Mohan?
So this is the first film we've done with him, and but yeah, we've come to know each other on this film. It's been an awesome relationship. It's taken a little longer than we expected, partly because of COVID. So we've been discussing this sequence for basically the 3 years that we've been working on it. So yeah, it's been an awesome ride, and he's very much into detail. So he will give feedback on a lot of details to push the shot and make it better and better. And he's pushed us to make the best sequence that we can make. So that's also really cool.
What is your favorite shot from? I think you already answered that. So let's go to the next one. What is one you wish you got to work on?
Would be pretty cool to work on the end sequence where the whole fortress collapses and all that stuff. That's a lot of physical action there. But I'm pretty pleased that we got to work on that initial bridge scene as well. It's basically where the two heroes connect and meet each other. So I'm very pleased that we got to work on that sequence, to be honest.
What's your best memory working on RRR?
I think just being on the shoot, and because there were, from the time we started building the miniatures till the time we went to Hyderabad to shoot them, a few months went by, and once we got there and saw it working and got the shots, and that was really nice. Seeing it all come together, seeing it finally, in camera.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. How long did you work on the show, and what was the size of your team?
I think we were about 30 people, and obviously that's sometimes the crew will be bigger, sometimes it'll be smaller, so it depends on where we are in the process. But we started working, so we got the initial brief in 2018 December, and the last shot got out the door in December 2021. So it was a long process, and we had obviously a few months of a COVID break, so where nothing was done in that period. But other than that, there was constantly something that was being done on the sequence. So it's been a long process. It's definitely been our longest project, but it's also been one of the most rewarding, I would say, because it's such an awesome film, and people seem to love it all over the world. So we're very, very happy.
Off topic, do Indian films release in Denmark?
Yeah, they do. So they don't have wide releases, but they do. So we don't get to see all of them, obviously, because the film industry in India is basically so big that
definitely.
if we got, if we had to show every single one, there would be no room for any other film. But the big ones like RRR and also the other ones we've been working on, Sahu and other films, they have been showing, and we go to the cinema every time. Every time we do an Indian film, we try to take the whole crew and go out and see it in the cinema to get the proper experience. And we did that for RRR as well, and it was a great experience.
How many shots did you work on in total for the show? And any we haven't... Okay, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, we worked on 142 shots. I don't recall. There was a couple of shots that were omitted. So there's always going to be some shots that are left on the editing floor. But yeah, in total we worked on 142 shots. Initially we only worked on the bridge sequence up until basically their meet.
Yeah.
And then we got to work on the sequence after that as well, when they come up from the water and basically the whole festival sequence with the human pyramid and all that. So we got to work on that as well, because that's basically a part of that same area. So once we got into that sequence, we got to detail our environment even more and add more crowds and more details on that area. So that was also very very cool to work on that as well.
Will we ever see those omitted shots in a future breakdown video?
Maybe maybe. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to, but maybe.
Because I've seen other vendors on Baahubali 2, they showed some shots that were not in the movie, so just curious.
Okay. Good question. So not all of them are fully completed, because they might have been omitted in the process where they were like 80% done with the shot, and then it was omitted. So in that case, it probably won't be shown in the reel. But maybe if some of them are all complete, then just might. But we still have a lot of things that we haven't shown yet from the sequence. We haven't shown breakdowns for a lot of it, so we still have a lot of shots to show off. Yeah.
What are some of your favorite miniatures in cinema history?
Yeah, so obviously the Lord of the Rings series comes to mind every time. That's been a huge inspiration for why we do what we do in the first place, especially in terms of miniatures. And that's the whole trilogy, right? So to find something more shot specific, there's a shot in War of the Worlds from 2004. It's the shot where Tom Cruise and his kids they're driving leaving the city, driving towards the camera, and then you see a whole bridge being broken down in the background, trucks that's falling down and crushing houses, and then there are explosions from each side of the road, basically lots of debris and all sorts of elements. It's not all miniature, but it's got plenty of miniature elements in it, and what I think it's great about that shot is that it uses CG and miniature and full size elements in a in what I think is a perfect combination.
Yeah.
And I also think the comp holds up pretty good because of the physicality of the whole sequence. It's and that's from 2004, and you know, it's not old, but it's a little bit
Yeah.
a little bit older.
It's almost 8 years.
And
Yeah.
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 But that's an awesome shot. It's fairly long, lots of movement, but it really works.
Yeah. I didn't know there were miniatures in that shot because whenever I see behind the scenes, they're always talking about the CG bridge.
That's the thing. The miniatures aren't they don't get the attention that they deserve all the time. But yeah, they actually did quite a few miniatures for that film.
What's your next project?
I can't tell yet. We obviously we are in discussion with some teams in India on new Indian films, and we would love to get that started. I could probably, you know, I'll make a deal with you when I'm allowed to tell you. I'll let you know.
Awesome, thank you.
How about that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I have to say thank you very much for agreeing to do this, and I hope I didn't take up a lot of your time. Yeah.
It's just awesome. Thank you, and thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it was great fun, educational talking to you. I hope we can do this again sometime.
For sure. You know, the next project coming up, we'll do it again. And the best of luck with your website and everything. We're going to follow it with curiosity, and it's going to be interesting to see what's coming out.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Talk to you next time. Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Have a nice day.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Goodbye.